Well, I invite you to stand as we open up, actually, we're reviewing, and we've done this last couple of weeks, response reading. And I'm going to read the titles and the words in white, and you guys will join together in the yellow one. And this is taken from Psalms 130, and this is really done in fashion of how the songs of ascent were going way back when. That sometimes they would be read in symphony back and forth. Sometimes it would be the priest that would start at the bottom steps of the outer court of the temple and would come and recite on every step coming up. So we're going to read this together. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord.
O Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to my cry for mercy.
If you, O Lord, kept the record of sins,
O Lord, who is sin?
But with you there is forgiveness.
Therefore you are feared.
I wait for the Lord. I wait for the Lord, my soul waits.
And in his word I put my hope.
O Israel, put your hope in the Lord.
For with the Lord is unfailing love.
And with him is full redemption.
He himself will redeem Israel from all her sins.
The reading of God's word.
Praise be to God.
Father, I thank you for, again, the time that we can collectively come together as a group. And Lord, as we come together, we worship you, but we also study about what was going on back in the Psalms of Ascent and how it does relate to us. So Father, guide us through this section of Scripture and we pray your blessings. Amen. Excuse me. There's a sports phrase that has been used many times. In fact, maybe it's not just with sporting events, but it's an event where you are trying to bring your best. And so it's kind of a colloquialism that says he brought his A game. Paul and I went out golfing about a month ago, and Paul brought his A game. Bill did not. But nonetheless, we had fun. But I was thinking about this. I remember a story that I heard from my father. My dad has been gone over 40 years, so this is probably 45 years ago, but I still remember. It's a story, maybe you've heard about it. He was reading it out of the Reader's Digest, and there's only 2 times I saw my dad cry. And this is one of them when he told me this story. So let's see if I can make it through. Because I've been known to follow that suit. Here it was. There was a high school football player. And he was just an average kind of guy. Wasn't a star, but he was on the team. Every game, before the game, he would come out of his locker room and he would separate a little bit from the team because he would lead his dad to the stands. His dad was blind. He was perfect. And his dad would sit there waiting for any kind of glimmer of the announcer saying his son was in the game and that he made a tackle or maybe he carried the ball, made a touchdown, or maybe just hearing his name was all that really mattered. And one day, the coach noticed that he came to the game and he did usher his dad in. His dad wasn't in the stand. He was busy with a lot of other things, and so he went on, the coach went on about his work, and all of a sudden that young man, he says, he came up to his dad, or his coach, and said, hey coach, there's an impossible way can I start today. And he did kind of fluff him off a little bit, and then he was persistent. This is coach, I really want to play with you. I really want to play. And so the coach finally said, well, how bad could it be? I could just put him in for a game, a player or two, and get him out. Because he's just an average player. And all of a sudden, something changed, remarkably changed about his playing. In fact, he went there and he grabbed the ball and he ran, made the first down, and he had just a stellar performance. And at the end of the game, he had scored a touchdown and made great yardage. And the coach came to him and he said, he asked the question, what is the deal here? Because, I mean, You not even brought your A game. You brought incredible performance. Incredible performance. You brought your whole being into the game that day. And the young man looked at his coach and said, well, you know, my dad was blind. You know, every game I would bring him up and set him in the stands. Well, he wasn't there today because my dad just died. And I realized it was the first time my dad has ever seen me play football. You know, the inspiration for that young man to bring everything he could. He brought his, everything he was about, and even raised something that he wasn't about. And had a stellar performance. But it's a touching example of bringing everything you have. You see, in the Songs of Ascent, it was not only a physical journey, but it was a spiritual, emotional one. And as author by the name of Duncan says, most nations tend to look on what they have achieved. Israel reflect upon what she has survived. That means the good things that they have come through and the good and the bad things they've come through, that was the Song of Ascent. And so we come to this passage today and we look at it in a little bit different fashion. It's not all the great things that had happened to Israel as they came to reflect and remember on what God had done. But it was also, as the psalmist declares, it says that sometimes he cries for mercy, meaning sometimes I come to this Song of Ascent and we come to worship God for not what I have done, but all that he has done for me. I don't know if you saw a report this past week from KGW News. And it was about being prepared for an earthquake. I don't know if anybody's been prepared for an earthquake, maybe insurance, maybe a bucket of water, or food in your pantry. And so they, you're going to cover in this because if anything hopefully this won't be the only thing you remember from the sermon today. But they said, do you have food and water prepared in a storage? And Kim and I said, we've got that. Do you have transportation of how you're going to get around? And do you have an emergency plan on where you're going to meet in case some big thing happens? And we talked about that. And we kind of got that in plan too. And then the question was, what are you going to do when the sewers don't work? How many people have never thought about it? How many people don't want to think about it? You're kind of with me that said, we don't want to mess with that because what happens if those toilets don't flush? And that's kind of an ugly part of life that is just part of life and hits all of us once in a while. But the psalmist comes, he says, out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. O Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to my cry for mercy. And then he says, so many times in this text, in fact, 8 different times in the 8 verses, he uses the word, O Lord, which could be linked to Yahweh, which is a holy name of God that wasn't even articulated, wasn't even mentioned except by the priest. And but yet it focuses in upon God's redeeming acts in history. And then also, it was the word Adonai, which emphasizes a relationship. So again, we're talking about context here. They're all coming to worship God in Jerusalem. And so they're having an opportunity to stop and think all that God has done for them. And they focus first upon a relationship. I don't know what kind of relationship you have with other people around you. A relationship with God. But this was a time to identify before a holy God their relationship. And he does it in such a way, and he talks about things that a lot of times we don't talk about. Because he says in verse 3, if you, O Lord, remember that's that personal phrase, if you, Lord, kept a record of sins, O Lord, who could stand? You know, he gets not only about a relationship, but he gets a bit personal. I will never forget the year after Kim and I were married. We just celebrated our 37th anniversary, but I remember, my brain still works. And there's certain things that make an indelible impression upon me. And I know in the midst of I've been transparent before, but this is one thing I don't think I've ever shared with. It was a martial arts class. And we had some testing. And we advanced in our belts. And we were all excited, and we went out with some guys and celebrated. And I didn't tell Kim where I was going, what we were doing. And I remember coming back, and I still see her face. And she looked at me and she said a few things. She wasn't yelling or anything, but she just said, I'm disappointed. I will never forget that. And as I disappointed her with my actions, it might have been the first time that he got me. And I guarantee it wasn't the last time. It hasn't been the last time. But it was a personal tragedy in my own life because my heart was broken because I disappointed the person whom I loved most. That was kind of what the psalmist is declaring right now in this song. That there's a lot of times that we think about the joy of the Lord as our strength and all the great things that he's done. And man, I've got a whole staff that's full of those times when God has showed up in my life. It was when Kim and I went on sabbatical. And we talk about that all the time. And Kim and I reflect upon that regularly. We have a stack of rocks over here that we all talk, we've all participated in one of the worship services 2 years ago. And we remembered about those positive things that we've experienced with the Lord. But how many times do we stop and we say, and we get personal, and we say, I'm sorry. That's what the psalmist is looking at right now. And he gets, as we all get quiet, I'm sure he was getting quiet. He was not just sharing his experience, but he was sharing experience from all the different people that are around him. Saying, if you, O Lord, remember he had a personal relationship and talks about God's redeeming acts and all that God was about was a personal relationship. That if you kept a record of sins, who could stand? You see, I think that's a new definition, and that's my focus today, is bringing our A game. Our A game is not how good we perform, but it's also talking about how bad we perform, but how much grace God delivers as he performs on our behalf in his full forgiveness. And so when you look at it, how many times, man, I remember Tony Evans, who is I don't know if anybody, the urban alternative, Tony Evans, who used to be classified by some of the kids in our church as the preacher who yells, and he does a really good job at that. And there was a time he was preaching in front of his big church, and he was getting down on him, talking about sin and whatnot, and forgiveness, and he said, "You may think that I'm not a preacher that talks about sin." He goes, "Well, I am today." This is the whole counsel of the Lord. And remember, these are people that are going up before the Lord 3 times a year and meeting with other parishioners that were living out of their county, out of their location. They would come together to worship. And he brings up a very important thing that sometimes we forget. Is that sometimes we disappoint God. And as my heart was broken when I disappointed my wife, so God's heart is broken when we disappoint him. But you know what? He forgives. In fact, in verse 4, he says, but that conditional statement, in fact, we've talked about this before, verse 3, there's a condition. If you, O Lord, kept a record of sins, who could stand? And then he says, but with you there is forgiveness. I don't know how many times that's crossed your path and you've thought about that. Psalms 130 happens to be what they call a penitent sin. In Latin, it was called the De Profunctus, which means out of the depths. But it points to the usefulness for all who found themselves in the depths of existence. You know, it was a transparency that they were encouraged to think about of their human, fallen, sinful condition. Martin Luther, the great Protestant reformer, he called it a Pauline song because the emphasis was on forgiveness through God's grace. You know, that's the important thing to remember in the midst of remembering our own sin, that God is faithful to forgive us. And it says in 1 John, cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Stephen Cole, who's a preacher that I follow, I listen to him periodically, read some of his stuff. He says, we have lost the sense of guilt that comes from realizing who we are in the presence of the Holy One. A great author, C.S. Lewis, who has written many books. My favorite is Street Letters and the Chronicles of Narnia. He says, when a man is getting better, he understands more and more clearly the evil that is still in him. When a man is getting worse, he understands his own badness less and less. You see, the Songs of Ascent were a spiritual journey. It wasn't just a physical journey, but it was a spiritual journey, much like we can take and participate in every day of our life, because it builds upon a relationship. It builds personal or transparency about our relationship with a righteous and holy God. And it's also bringing our best and our worst. The last part of this passage, I'm going to read, says, I wait for you, O Lord, my soul waits. In his word I put my hope. O Israel, put your hope in the Lord. With the Lord is unfailing love, and with him is full redemption. He himself will redeem Israel from all their sins. You see, worship is not just about all the great things that God has done in relation to, providing all those things that we may see in relationships and guidance and provision. But it's also the fact that God delivers a thing called forgiveness. And in the words of what C.S. Lewis says, a man or woman is getting better when he understands more and more clearly the evil that's still in it. And a man is getting, or a woman is getting worse when he understands his own badness less and less. This is what you call a whole counsel of the Word of God. The good, the bad, the ugly. But the positive statement is that our hope is in the Lord because he does forgive. As we move towards communion today, it's a great opportunity to reflect and remember what God has done because what we have done. I invite the worship team to come on up at this point as we move into our closing and moving into communion. You need not be a member of the Milwaukie Covenant Church to participate in communion, but all we ask is that you know Christ as your Savior, that you know that he has forgiven you of all your sins. Coming to communion is a wonderful opportunity to remember and reflect upon all we have done, but also to remember all that God has done. Father, I thank you for a time of worship, time of remembrance, as difficult sometimes as it may be, but a time to reflect upon who you are, what you have done, what you continue to do for us. So Lord, as we come to communion today, may you be blessed. May we reflect. May we understand the relationship. May we be transparent. We bring both our good and our bad